Ferdinand Magellan. Ferdinand Magellan is considered one of the greatest explorers in human history. Between 1519 and 1522, his expedition became the first to successfully sail around the entire world by sea. Ironically, Magellan himself did not survive the journey. In 1521, he was killed in the Philippines after underestimating local resistance during a conflict. Despite not living to see the voyage completed, Magellan secured his place in history by proving something revolutionary: that the Earth could be fully circumnavigated by sea. Magellan also left behind names that are still in use today. The Strait of Magellan opened a route for ships between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The Pacific Ocean itself, which he named for its calm waters compared to the violent seas he had crossed earlier. Even the Magellanic penguin carries his name. But Magellan's most infamous story came from the southern tip of South America. There, he claimed to have encountered a race of giant human people so tall that his sailors barely reached their waists. He described them as naked, singing, dancing, and throwing dust on their heads as part of religious rituals. Magellan named them the Patagons. This was no minor exaggeration. He described them as truly gigantic beings, far larger than normal humans. According to accounts, his crew even captured 2 of them, intending to take them to Europe as proof. Both supposedly died before reaching Spain. For nearly 200 years, Europeans accepted this story as fact. Maps labeled the region Patagonia. Writers and scholars treated the giants as real. Expeditions were launched to find them. Only later did historians and anthropologists uncover the truth. The native people of the region, likely the Tehuelche, were indeed taller than the average European of the time, but they were not giants. They were ordinary people viewed through fear, fascination, and exaggeration. Magellan's story shows how a myth can become history and how one man's words can permanently reshape the world map. Francisco de Orellana. Francisco de Orellana is famous for one simple but astonishing reason. He became the first European to travel the entire length of the Amazon River. But how this happened is far from simple. Orellana was part of an expedition searching for food and gold in South America. At one point, the group reached a massive river system. When supplies began to run low, instead of turning back, Orellana made a decision that would define his legacy. He chose to move forward. For nearly 2 months, Orellana and his men drifted and fought their way through one of the most dangerous and unknown regions on Earth. Dense jungles, hostile tribes, disease and hunger surrounded them. Survival itself became their only goal. Simply making it out alive would have been extraordinary. But Orellana didn't stop there. He claimed that during the journey, his men were attacked by fierce female warriors, women who fought with bows, spears, and absolute brutality. According to him, these women lived without men, ruled their own society, and closely resembled the Amazons of ancient Greek mythology. The story instantly captured Europe's imagination. In reality, historians believe the attackers were almost certainly male warriors with long hair, common among certain local tribes. In the chaos of battle, combined with exhaustion and fear, Orellana either misunderstood what he saw or deliberately exaggerated it. But by then, the damage was done. The river was named the Amazon, permanently linking South America's greatest river to an ancient Greek myth. The story influenced art, literature, and exploration for centuries. Orellana's exaggeration didn't just survive, it became official geography. Sir Walter Raleigh. Sir Walter Raleigh is often remembered as a refined explorer, poet, and a favored courtier of Queen Elizabeth I, but his true legacy lies in how deeply he embraced myth. Raleigh played a major role in England's early attempts to colonize the Americas, including the establishment of the Roanoke colony. Although the settlement failed, it marked England's serious entry into the New World and challenged Spanish dominance. Later, Raleigh turned his attention to South America. There, he didn't merely repeat myths, he expanded them. He confirmed stories of Amazon warriors, insisting they truly existed. But he went even further. Raleigh described a race called the Iwaipanuma people with eyes on their shoulders, mouths in their chests, and hair growing backward. He wrote about them as if they were perfectly normal. Most influential of all was his claim of El Dorado, a city made entirely of gold, hidden deep within South America. There was no evidence for this claim, yet Europe believed him. Raleigh's stories fueled centuries of obsession, countless expeditions, massive financial investments, and untold deaths, all in pursuit of a city that never existed. His lies didn't just mislead explorers, they altered the course of history itself. John Smith. John Smith is one of the most controversial figures in early American history. He was among the leaders of Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement in North America. Conditions there were horrific. hunger, disease, internal conflict, and constant danger. Most settlers died. Smith claimed his leadership and diplomacy saved the colony, but his fame rests on one story above all others. According to Smith, he was captured by Native Americans and sentenced to death, only to be saved at the last moment when the chief's young daughter, Pocahontas, threw herself over him and spared his life. It is a powerful story. The problem is that Smith told it decades later, after Pocahontas had already died, and could neither confirm nor deny it. His earlier accounts of captivity never mentioned such a rescue. Today, historians believe the event either never happened or was actually a ritual adoption ceremony that Smith misunderstood as an execution. This fits his pattern. Smith frequently told stories of piracy, enslavement, beheadings, and heroic escapes, none of which were independently verified. Even during his lifetime, many considered him unreliable, yet his stories shaped early American mythology and remain part of popular culture today. Marco Polo. Marco Polo is perhaps the most famous traveler in world history. His book, The Travels of Marco Polo, introduced Europe to Asia in unprecedented detail. He claimed to have spent 24 years traveling through China, Mongolia, and the Middle East, serving Kublai Khan and governing cities. For centuries, his word was accepted as fact. But modern historians notice something strange. Chinese historical records are extremely detailed, documenting nearly every significant foreign visitor, yet Marco Polo's name appears nowhere once. Even more suspicious is what Polo failed to mention: tea, printing, calligraphy, foot binding, and the great wall core elements of Chinese civilization. Instead, he may have collected stories along trade routes and woven them into a single narrative, placing himself at the center. If true, one of history's most influential travel books was essentially a second-hand account. John Mandeville. John Mandeville's travel book was one of the most popular works of the Middle Ages. It was read by scholars, artists, and explorers, and is believed to have inspired Christopher Columbus himself. His stories described extraordinary races, mouthless dwarfs who drank through straws, dog-headed humans, and people who survived by smelling apples. John Mandeville likely never existed at all. Historians now believe the book was written by an unknown author who invented a fictional traveler to give credibility to recycled myths and legends. And yet, this fictional explorer inspired real exploration. Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus, one of history's most famous travelers, is often credited with discovering America in 1492, but nearly everything he believed about his journey was wrong. Columbus set out to reach Asia by sailing west. His calculations were deeply flawed. He underestimated the size of the Earth by thousands of miles and assumed Japan was much closer than it actually was. Had the Americas not existed, his crew would have died at sea. When Columbus reached the Caribbean, he was convinced he had arrived in Asia. He called the local people Indians, a mistake that continues to this day. But Columbus didn't just misunderstand geography, he exaggerated everything. In his journals, he described the islands as overflowing with gold, spices, and unimaginable wealth. These claims were either gross exaggerations or outright lies, designed to secure continued funding from the Spanish crown. He also told stories of strange creatures, people with tails, dog-faced cannibals, and monstrous beings living inland. There is no evidence that any of these existed. Modern historians believe these tales were a mix of fear, misunderstanding, European myths, and deliberate fabrication. The most shocking lie Columbus never abandoned was this: even after 4 voyages, after encountering massive continents and civilizations, he refused to admit he had discovered a new world. He died insisting he had reached the edges of Asia. His denial did not stop history, but it shows how ego, ambition, and storytelling can overpower truth. Columbus reshaped the world not only through discovery, but through denial. Pytheas of Massalia. Long before the age of exploration, long before Columbus and Magellan, there was a Greek explorer named Pytheas of Massalia. His stories sounded so unbelievable that ancient historians dismissed him entirely. Pytheas lived around the 4th century BCE and claimed to have sailed from the Mediterranean to northern Europe, possibly reaching Britain, Scandinavia, and even the Arctic Circle. He described a place called Thule, where the sun barely set, the sea froze solid, and the boundaries between land, water, and sky seemed to dissolve. Scientists and historians began to see that Pytheas may have been telling the truth. The frozen sea could have been sea ice. The endless daylight matched Arctic summers. Thule may have been Norway, Iceland, or a region near the Arctic Circle. Even his observations about tides, something the Greeks didn't understand, were later proven correct. So why was Pytheas rejected? Because his world sounded too strange. Pytheas represents the opposite of many explorers, a man whose truths were dismissed as lies. His reputation was destroyed not because he exaggerated, but because he was far ahead of his time. In a world where lies often became truth, Pytheas told the truth and was called a liar. For more stories like this and more historical documentaries, don't forget to subscribe.